So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Doug Brooks, Executive Vice President of Ipsos MMA. Doug, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today and for joining the panel discussion. Before we get started, just want to introduce the panelists and the moderator. So Tina Moffett from Forrester Research, happy to have her today moderating the panel discussion. Sean Barrett from Albertsons, John Francis from PayPal, Mike Lau from Gilead, and this is Doug Brooks from Ipsos MMA. As we go through the panel discussion, feel free to send your questions and we will look to either address them at the end of the panel discussion or we will follow up via email upon completion of the webinar. So what are the drivers behind the discussion today and what's led us to this meeting today? There are 5 key points that we will focus on and really talk through as part of the discussion. Point 1, whether it's COVID-19 or many of the global market dynamics that we're experiencing today, what it has done is really accelerated the digital strategy of most brands across most global regions and markets. The media and commercial investment decision ecosystem is more complex than ever, and we'll spend some time talking about that. The constant changes in both data and ad tech environment, as many of you are aware of, have really accelerated the need for unified analytics to compensate for some of the data sparsity issues. The need for change management and true process workflow engineering to ensure that analytics are embedded and activated effectively through a closed loop process. And then from an organizational standpoint, all of this is culminating. We're seeing the role of CMOs evolve into more of what we would call a chief commercial officer for both omni-channel and cross-functional business planning. So if we think about the complexities of the commercial decision-making ecosystem, this is what it looks like for many companies, whether you're financial services, apparel, retail, restaurant, telco, pharmaceuticals, right? You have this very complex matrix of audiences, whether you're looking to acquire new customers or grow lifetime value of existing, competing against many of the players in the space for your share of voice against those audiences, tactical execution, understanding the right allocation of your spend across platforms and ad formats and placement and timing. Channel and platform mix, really one of the true key themes today is around the balance of brand versus performance. Synergies, understanding not just how activities may work in a silo, but how they work together in an integrated manner. And then finally, the impact of market conditions. Being able to make all of these decisions while understanding the implications of changes in marketplace dynamics, whether it's gas prices or global economic factors, and how they would influence the effectiveness of your strategies in market and the behavior of consumers. When we talk about the changes in the data and the ad tech environment, right? So it's everything from looking at the loss of third-party cookies, right? Walled gardens, fragmented data, loss of identifiers, the explosion of retail media networks, right? Another option in the media mix and another opportunity around targeting, all the way through to identity and first-party data, understanding the rise of permission-based first-party data or CDPs across many organizations, and then to add to the mix, growth in connected TV as another option, and we've seen that significant growth over the last few years. All of this has brought the need for this unified marketing measurement capability, and this is what we're talking about today. Unified marketing measurement is really bringing together the value that a marketing mix approach brings, which is holistic, looking at brand media, performance media, CRM, things like sponsorships, Salesforce, and bringing in operations factors and external factors to control for them, linking that to an attribution model to give you that real-time targeting activity against customers, audiences, placements, etc. All of this through closed loop framework that allows you to balance short-term and long-term, optimize investments, support both annual budgeting and real-time, while also controlling for these external factors. The change management component of this has never been more critical. As you've seen from the previous charts and parts of this discussion, it's not just about marketing and media. It's about integrating with operations and business drivers and external factors the need to bring the entire organization along for the journey, right? Gaining cross-functional buy-in and alignment, driving effective activation through purposeful workflows, value tracking and ongoing validation, and then having a formal marketing reappraisal and reoptimization process as an ongoing feedback loop. And that brings us to the evolving role of the CMO. As we've talked about with all of these different components around integration across functions, bringing different disparate data sets together, bringing different forms of analytics together, bringing down silos in an organization so that you can plan and optimize commercial investments in a unified way. The chart to the right sort of tells the story around the dimensions of managing customer strategy with global markets, trying to drive growth and margin, bringing together a marketing strategy with a product strategy, a customer strategy, and an overall unified strategy within the environment of changing external and competitive market dynamics. The role of global portfolio, omni-channel strategy, business planning and scenario planning, accounting for external changes, and then cross-functional synergies. So let's dive right into the discussion. I'll hand it over to Tina Moffat now to lead us through it, really focused on how are these industry leaders addressing the challenges that I just addressed, what's Forrester's seeing in the marketplace, and then we'll close with what is our point of view over the next 2 to 3 years.
Great, thanks, Doug. And thank you to the MMA team for inviting me to moderate this panel of really impressive marketing and analytics leaders today. And I look forward to a lively discussion. So as Doug said, marketing's goal, really its mandate is to help build long-term sustainable business through smart acquisition strategies and continued growth and retention of existing customers. Now, to do this effectively, marketers need to embrace data and analytics, specifically what Doug just talked about, unified marketing measurement, which is the orchestration of advanced analytical techniques to understand strategic and tactical marketing efficacy. That approach uses data to understand what marketing is working, what isn't, and to really give marketers a blueprint to develop data-driven marketing plans. Now, this requires a lot of alignment of people, process, data, and technology and insights, and analytical expertise for more precise measures. But it doesn't stop there. The insights need to be practical, widely adopted, accepted, and ultimately actionable. So marketers and agency partners can take these results and build data-driven marketing plans. So marketers need to apply best practices to ensure these insights are accepted, adopted, and activated. And we know through Forrester research that one of the top challenges with using more advanced marketing measurement approaches like unified marketing measurement is issues like stakeholder buy-in and activation of insights. So I'm happy to be here today with our panel of experts where we'll discuss their experience in using unified marketing measurement. And they're going to provide some best practices on how to successfully adopt and activate insights from the unified measurement model. So let's get started with some really great discussion. My first question is really around the changing tides. Right, we're seeing a lot of major economic, environmental, and advertising ecosystem changes that's forced marketers to shift their marketing strategies and overall plans. Marketers now need to consider how forces like inflation, the pandemic, third-party cookie deprecation, and even supply chain issues will impact their overall marketing mix, the performance of their marketing, and build these considerations into their marketing measurement models and their future marketing plans. So, Sean, I want to start with you as a marketing leader at Albertsons. You see that the grocery industry, CPG, and even kind of overall retail experience economic pressure, specifically supply chain shortages due to COVID. How do you consider the changes in the supply chain due to COVID in your marketing measurement and optimization models? And how do these market forces, how have they shifted your marketing and media dollars at Albertsons?
Great question. Good to be with all of you on such an important topic this morning. I think that what you've described, and certainly what the grocery industry, but many other industries have gone through over the past year, is just incredible volatility. There's been a ton of uncertainty in it, and it's been volatile, obviously, from the effects of COVID and everything that has happened since then, and the supply chain constraints that we have today and the inflationary environment that we have today. But also, as most of you know, I mean, it's just a fascinating field that we work in because it's changing every day. Some of those changes are positive, and some of those changes require us to react. So, you know, I think the key to this and succeeding in this is agility. And agility is significantly aided when you have confidence in measurement, and when you have an approach to measurement that gives you confidence in results and what's happening, that you can use to react to on a variety of different levels, at a macro level for making significant budget shifts, or on a micro level of optimizing performance on a daily or weekly basis. I mean, specifically for Albertsons and grocery right now, yes, as you mentioned, there's supply chain constraints, which many industries are dealing with, but also inflation that's hitting our customers significantly. And grocery is an incredibly complex business. I mean, we have thousands of deals in our stores every week on tens of thousands of items that we stock in our stores. So, you know, what the key is delivering, you know, the right message and the right deal and offer to the right customer at the right time. And that requires an incredible amount of personalization so that we can bring the best deal to people so they can stretch their budget as far as possible when they're coming in to make their grocery shop. And of course, you know, with supply chain constraints, we have to make sure that when we're offering a deal to a customer, that what they see in our advertising, they come into the store and they can get, or it's a completely wasted impression and waste of advertising dollars. So the key to that for us is just great data foundation, great personalization capabilities, and you know, the ability to optimize dynamically on the fly, and also you know, on a near real-time basis, looking at measurement and impact and shifting dollars and focus.
Great. Now, John, at PayPal, I know you probably have to deal with a lot of changes that's occurring in the ad tech industry now, specifically with the Google's intention to deprecate the third-party cookie, and even Apple's restrictions on tracking within their ecosystem. Now, PayPal, as a leader in the digital payment space, I'm sure has felt that impact. Can you describe how the changing ad tech ecosystem has impacted your marketing measurement and media measurement models and optimizations?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. Really excited to join here for the topic. And you know, I really like what Sean said as well around consistency in building a strong foundation, because I think at the end of the day, the shifting sands have changed our perspective just in terms of the measurement rubric and how we understand the efficacy of how we're deploying dollars. And you know, what we've heard loud and clear from our marketing stakeholders, and like, it's not just PayPal, it's not, you know, this isn't a unique problem, that we have the same challenges at Starbucks, but you know, I think there's an element of sausage making and trying different measurement techniques over the years and different disciplines for how you do it. And in some cases, we're measuring a program with two different methodologies. And if you ask any marketer, they're ready to pull their hair out because we spend a lot of time just trying to adjudicate what maybe two different approaches would say. So right now, there's more and more of a push for simplicity and a clear rubric for how we think about measurement. And I think that's where the power of, and I promise this isn't a plug for Ipsos, but just for how we think about the framework, and especially on the media mix modeling, which is really where we think of as a single source of truth for those higher level investments and where we deploy dollars. Because, by the way, as you mentioned, it also affords us the opportunity to account for other factors or covariates of things that can be influencing what's happening to our sales, because it's really a multivariate approach to solving what is truly a multivariate problem. And that's the advantage over what we may have historically done with different types of measurement solutions, where it's sort of like you're looking at a part of a problem in isolation when you really want to be looking at it as a multivariate solution. So I think that's really the power here, and I think it's really helping our marketing stakeholders understand and really just know that they do have more one-stop shopping for the higher level understanding of ROI and where we're deploying dollars. Now, when it comes to optimization, of course, MMM won't work, but that's where we rely more on where we can, leverage experimentation and testing, especially with own channels, where you can actually start to test and learn against whether it's different versions of creatives or different types of targeting or segments that you want to go after, using the incrementality and the experimentation capabilities there to help inform the tuning and optimization, but relying more and more on the unified measurement approach with MMM to help us kind of inform how we're thinking about our higher order investments. So I think, knock on wood, that approach will hopefully be future-proofed in terms of how we are seeing some of the changes in the industry, and it will allow us to keep kind of a finger on what's happening from an efficacy perspective. And I think the consistency, as I mentioned and Sean mentioned, it's important because I think that's really what our stakeholders are craving. They don't want to hear about some WYSIWYG new application for measurement. They want to see something that's repeatable time and time again that they can understand, and I think that's the value here.
I think what's really interesting, you mentioned testing. At Forrester, we administer a global marketing survey every year since, I've been with Forrester for about 11 years, and we ask a question about methodology for measurement. And we saw an 11% increase of adoption of testing and experimental design as a way to measure uplift, right? And I think it's like addressing the issue of on a day-to-day campaign and tactic reporting, we need a better way to measure incrementality. So, and what's old is new again. 15 years ago, this is what we used to do on the client side. So Mike, from your perspective, you're in a very, very interesting industry, being a part of Gilead, where you have multiple objectives, you may have multiple constraints, and you have to address the needs of end patients and physicians, right? Because they're both your customers. Can you describe how an event like COVID has impacted your marketing analytics and measurement approaches? What did you have to now consider because of COVID? And then how did it accelerate your overall digital strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Tina, and thanks for having me on this panel. I think it's really interesting hearing from these other panelists across industries, because so much of it still resonates despite the differences in our businesses, which is amazing to hear. But to your question, historically, pharma marketing has been very reliant on the impact of our field sales force. Going to the doctor's offices, talking with physicians, communicating the value proposition, the target patient profile of our products. And I think that, all the other channels that we deploy, TV for direct to patient marketing or digital or social, really plays a subservient role to bolstering that personal promotion via that sales force. And so for obvious reasons, once COVID hit us in 2020, it really forced us to reevaluate how we thought about our overall marketing strategy and approach across all of our product areas. Specifically because so many of these healthcare providers were overwhelmed facing COVID, and they didn't have time to have us on site talking about products that were unrelated to what was in their mind the most urgent need, and fairly so, right, rightly so. it presented us with a challenge, right? How do we continue to drive our business, continue to engage with our healthcare providers so that other therapeutic areas and patients in them continue to get connected to care? So we had to play catch up in many ways to other industries and to accelerate our digital capabilities. And that came with increased investment and a better need to understand the impact of those digital campaigns and performances and how it was connecting to and driving our business overall. So we ended up expanding our digital marketing operations team. We increased our investments in non-personal promotion, tech infrastructure. We expanded our analytics capabilities with unified attribution so that we could have these near real-time optimization capabilities with our media agencies. And even as COVID restrictions have eased, it's clear that this is sort of the new normal for us, right? It took something as big as COVID to really kick us in the pants and get us moving in the right direction to start catching up with these other industries. But I think this is definitely the right way to head in terms of the future for our digital strategy.
Well, you know what's interesting is that at Forrester, we've been tracking for years, like the shift from traditional media to digital. And when the pandemic happened, we saw more dollars go towards digital. And we were like, this was the pendulum that finally swung digital investments to increase over kind of traditional media. And I think across all industries, and we saw that across all industries, and it was even accelerated when we saw through our consumer technographics survey that, people were shifting to at-home working. They were online more. They wanted to engage more, and they eventually started to hunger for like going out and going in store. But I think marketers did a really good job at identifying and shifting almost immediately towards digital investments. Great. So I think I want to shift the conversation a little bit to understand your point of view on some challenges. Clients we talked to in for our 2022 Forrester Wave evaluation process for marketing measurement and optimization solutions indicated that a specific challenge for marketing measurement adoption is stakeholder buy-in. Now, this was really interesting to me because we talk to CMOs all the time, and they always say, hey, we are data driven. But according to our data, we're hearing, hey, it's really hard to get stakeholders to get consensus and confidence in a lot of these analytical models. I want to explore some best practices across our panelists and what are some best practices that our panelists have used to secure adoption and confidence of their unified marketing measurement approach. So John, I'm going to start with you at PayPal. You've had several senior analytics roles across other industries, including telco and QSR, according to my research to prep for this call. I did a little digging on LinkedIn. So what are some of the universal best practices that you can share with us in gaining confidence and consensus among your peers if you're kind of building this very sophisticated unified measurement model? And how do those best practices change if you have different organizational structures?
Yeah, look, I mean, this could probably be a subject of its own webinar. I'll admit openly a lot of failures along the way on my learning journey. And I think it's probably, I probably have tried to overcomplicate it too much in the past. And so I've pivoted pretty hard over the last few years. But I think one observation, and regardless of whether it's marketing measurement or any other analytic data product, it's not a field of dreams, meaning if you build it, they will not necessarily come. And I think Doug talked a lot about the change management and his opening, and I could not underscore the importance of that and how you think about bringing people along on the journey for adopting these new tools and capabilities. It's not about having the best AI or machine learning or the smartest attribution model. No one cares. It's about actually having the empathy and understanding of what the marketer is trying to do and deeply immersing into those needs. And frankly, even just showing that you're willing to roll up your sleeve and partner on how you can use data to evolve the strategy in being really viewed as a credible thought partner and not someone who's trying to keep score. of how marketing's doing and saying, well, like you guys really suck here, or this was really bad. No, it's not about that. It's about creating a culture where of empathy and understanding and looking at what the data is telling you and how you can evolve those learnings, not just from a dashboard or report where you share out how everything was working, but you actually have a seat at the table and you're making recommendations based on what the data is saying. I think that is a high degree of credibility that a lot of times you see missing in organizations, analytic organizations, where it's more, well, here's what we observed, here's the dashboard, you can go check it out. And that model never works. And so there's a lot here just around mindset. I think that's a big part of it. And then the other is just as you think about capabilities within your team, my other learning or aha is the idea of these analytic strategists. So folks that can partner closely with a marketing organization, and they're going to be, again, a seat at the table, and they can help really with the change management and how you start to create a roadmap for how you can evolve the learnings and the tools that are being stood up, and really start to test and learn into that. Because my other observation is, and again, back to the Field of Dreams comment, if you just drop a new capability or tool on someone who's been doing a certain job for a certain way for years, chances are that they're not going to immediately or organically gravitate to it because they've already got a full plate and 8 or 10 hours a day are already trying to scrape by in terms of what they're already doing. So you have to be very intentional about the change management, how you bring people on that journey. I think that's probably, again, in some ways, that capability or that mindset is probably more important than the tool itself. And so I think you've got to find the right people in your analytics organization who can help with that. And that's not an organic skill set that comes from a data scientist or statistician.
I was on mute, sorry. I completely agree. Now, Mike, you mentioned at Gilead, you have to coordinate between marketing and sales team to gain confidence and support of your marketing measurement and optimization models. I know at Forrester, as an analyst, I often talk to similar industries like insurance, where they have the same problem. They have to coordinate between marketing and agent teams to kind of ensure marketing efforts are being used and tracked. So what are some best practices for adoption of like a unified measurement model across these different functional groups?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the great opportunities of unified measurement and marketing mix is also the greatest challenge, right? That it's not a single stakeholder that you need to get on board. These are comprehensive models that span as many channels as you can have data for. And what that means is that there's something in it for everyone, right? Whether that's your sales leadership or your physician promotion team or your patient promotion team, they each have a stake in those insights and the results that we bring forward to the executive team. And as a result, you need to work intimately with each of those functional groups to really educate them on the methodology, get their buy-in, get that credibility built that John was talking about, really collaborating with them, right? So that they're in it with you. They feel ownership. You source their data, you understand their key business questions, you understand what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to get out of this readout, right? It's not just a grade, you scored an A or a B or a C. It's, this is where you did well. This is recommendations for improvement. This is what you were trying to achieve. This is where you did or did not, and how you could, really work with them to understand where these models can play in terms of serving them, in terms of giving them a path forward. And so they're getting something out of it as well as you are. And we found success by ensuring that we're not just including folks at the leadership level, right? We actually want to get down and dirty with the product managers, with the agency partners, so that we can establish that credibility and establish that collaborative relationship to really help those diverse functional groups feel this sense of shared ownership over the outcome of the analytics. And as a result, the insights, right? At that point, it becomes an organic extension that they're going to take those insights and run with it. You don't need to force that upon them, right? They were there building it with you, and they were the ones asking the questions. So when you help provide the answers, they're going to take it and run. And I think, finally, for those of us that have multiple product areas that we're supporting, really find one that you feel like you have a high probability of success with, establish that, that relationship, really nail it, and then leverage that relationship across other product areas as well, right? Use that as a shared experience, to really bring others on board.
Great. And Sean, can you give us, if you could give one best practice to people attending on how to build a confidence and acceptance of your unified measurement model within the C-suite, specifically with the CFO team, what would it be? What would be that one best practice?
I have to do one. Just a couple comments, because I thought John and Mike both made some great comments. I think that, John, one thing that I just want to echo is just a culture of learning and being data driven is just critical for your company to embrace. And the more that starts at the top, the better. We've been on that journey and are much more of a culture of letting data inform our decisions than we were several years ago. So I wanted to reinforce that. A culture of learning and putting the data at the center is critical. And Mike also mentioned enrolling others in the process of developing your marketing mix model. We've found success in that as well. We operate in a number of regional divisions, and collaborating with our division teams to make sure that the data that we have for what's going on in their market is accurate is critical, because garbage in, garbage out is the easiest way to get your model thrown out the window when you're trying to enroll stakeholders. So my two additional tips for enrolling just confidence in a marketing mix model and return on investment is like the most important thing a marketing leader needs to do. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. And if you don't have a data source and a proper measurement methodology that gets you there, you're starting from a really shaky foundation. And I found that your finance team is one of the most important partners in this. And one of my tips for working with the finance team is it's about, roll up your sleeves, education, and persistence of running through it in whatever detail is needed, because a lot of people don't understand the very complex methodologies for marketing mix modeling and regression-based analysis. Your finance teams are the most likely to get it, but they still will need to roll up their sleeves and really understand it. So you just need to take that time and do it over and over and over again until people can give input and feedback and feel like they fully understand the process. So that's one. The second thing I would suggest is doing test and control experiments and showing impact, and then connecting that with impact from your marketing mix model as well. People really can sink their teeth into test and control experiments, and it's a really great validator of what you're seeing in your marketing mix model.
Great, thank you. And before we move on to the next question, I just want to encourage anybody who has any questions for our panelists, or for me or for Doug, please just pop them into the Q&A portion of your control. So another challenge we discovered is activation. I know at Forrester, this is always a challenge when we ask a question, what's the biggest hurdle of making use of your measurement and insights? It's always around data and then activation. It's a Herculean task that requires a lot of coordination between internal analytics teams and marketing leadership teams, or even director levels of marketing and media agencies. So I want to dive into some best practices around how to activate a lot of the optimization recommendations and scenario plans. So Mike, I'll start with you. I know you manage a lot of moving parts at Gilead, and to ensure a consistent portfolio view of marketing performance is not only shared, but it's actually acted on. How do you ensure and continually manage the recommendations from your scenario plans or your optimization models? How do you ensure that they're activated across your internal teams like sales and marketing, as well as with your partner agencies? And how do you connect those dots between the agency partners and your internal teams to ensure that workflow is consistent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from an internal standpoint, it really starts with what we touched on before, right? Really engaging the stakeholder groups in the beginning, making sure it's a collaborative exercise and building that sense of ownership and co-ownership with them into the insights that they're looking for. And if they come into it with a specific set of questions that you can uniquely answer with these models, you don't really need to hold them accountable to activating on them, right? They'll sort of do it themselves. But beyond that, I think, what we try to do is really think about how timing of these analyses and timing of these insights matters quite a bit, right? We plan and schedule our marketing analytics to read out to coincide with our annual brand planning process. And that way, those insights are delivered in a timely way that can be immediately built into the upcoming brand strategy and tactical plan for the upcoming year. The models we build for scenario planning or budget optimization can be used directly in budget requests and expense planning and things like that, also coinciding with that timing of the year. And once you have that cadence worked out and that working relationship established, the pull through on insights and recommendations becomes much more organic, right? And I think that one thing that we do really well with Ipsos is ensure that we have partners with the agency as well, partnerships with the agency on a monthly basis with those optimization readouts. So Ipsos works directly with the agency to sort of co-develop action plans based on the insights that they see in the data, and use those monthly check-ins as a mechanism to keep their to keep the action plans active and refreshed. And our brand partners really use those as opportunities to hold their agencies accountable. So using that credibility that we've established allows us to be their eyes and ears to provide that unbiased view of performance that they can utilize. And most importantly, they can track the impact of those optimization decisions, which further reinforce the importance of the analytics and the benefit to both the brand and the agency teams.
Great. Now, Sean, you manage several large local brands across the country, and because of this, you have managed various analytical needs of different marketing groups, and measurement and insights could look very different across different brands and demographic areas. And I can imagine that managing activation strategies across different agencies and internal teams at a local level would require a tremendous amount of coordination across your workflow. So how do you ensure that your marketing measurement optimization recommendations are activated across hyperlocal markets while meeting the needs of different internal teams and dealing with different agencies?
Yeah, good question. A couple things I'd echo that Mike mentioned is your agencies have to know that, and all your partners in marketing need to know that you have a single source of truth for performance, and that's your marketing mix model. And ultimately, any recommendations I get from an agency have to be anchored in that, and all of our planning and budgeting discussions have to be anchored in that. Mike also mentioned coinciding your readouts on your model with the planning cycles. That's a great best practice, and the planning should start and end ultimately through forecasting with what your marketing models are predicting and expecting from the performance. Now, we do at Albertsons manage over 20 regional banners, and we operate with 12 regional divisions to do that. But the marketing is not as complex as it might seem. Most of our digital media is managed at a national level, but what we work with our local partners on is localizing the messaging. So we leverage our marketing mix model to plan and budget on a local level. But if we do that right at the beginning of the year and we revisit it quarterly, we pretty much stick to that plan. And then the work becomes optimizing and making sure that the messaging is right for each of the local environments. And specifically that we have continuity between our messaging across all channels. So if something is happening in one of our stores, that it matches what we're doing in digital media and other places as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. And we're coming up close to time, and this has been such a great conversation and discussion. So I actually want to skip to the final question. The advertising and marketing ecosystem will experience drastic changes over the next 2 to 3 years. We're already experiencing it now. And I want to get all the panelists' opinions on how they expect their marketing strategies and data-driven measurement and planning initiatives to change, given the changes in the advertising and marketing ecosystem. And John, I want to jump to you first. Over the year or so, we anticipate that Google will deprecate its third-party cookies and walled gardens will grow higher. We already see it with different publishers and retail media groups building their own ecosystems. And this is going to be making for more challenging to measure cross-platform, omni-channel advertising strategies. How do you think this will shake out in the next year, and how are you preparing your PayPal team to address these challenges?
Yeah, I think, it's what we talked about before. I think the good news here is, or maybe it's bad news, I suppose, but what we learned through the changes from Apple and in terms of, what's happening with third-party data and cookies informed our current decisions and how we're approaching and putting more emphasis on things like the media mix modeling in terms of how we think about measurement. I think we'll just continue to focus on that. And then as you think about more local optimization at a campaign level, it comes back to just continuing to lean in on own channel first-party data, experimentation, and test and learn to help inform where you can and get those incrementality rates. So I actually think it's just a continuation of the strategy that we've already put in place. And, in some ways we've sort of built a bit of a firewall around the changes Google is making, just in essence because of what's already happened with Apple. So,
yeah. Now, Sean, in your industry ecosystem, how do you anticipate the rise of the retail media networks impacting marketing and media analytics at Albertsons? And what are you doing to prepare for this shift of media within the media selling and buying ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know we don't have a lot of time, but retail media networks is a big focus for us. We actually launched our own retail media network this past February called Albertsons Media Collective. And that was the result of a few years of hard work bringing our marketing technologies up to where they needed to be able to deliver a great product to our CPG partners. I was a former CPG marketer, and I believe that if retail media networks had been invented when I was working for Procter & Gamble, I would never have invested a single dollar that I couldn't tie to a proven transaction. I really do think it's the future of where media is going. There's still a lot of work for the industry to grow up, but ultimately marketing is about selling something. And the companies that do have that ultimate transaction data, if they can build a proposition for their vendors and suppliers to advertise and close the loop on performance, it's a game changer. And ultimately, it's going to make you a better marketer for your enterprise marketing as well. All of our enterprise marketing runs on the same rails and technology as our retail media network, and we measure and optimize the same way, making sure that everything we do, we look at the transactions that result from it and optimize for maximum ROI.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, the retail media networks, because to me, it's not only about the opportunity to connect directly, like with a retailer and an advertiser, to measure and target, but there's implications of like using that data to understand like market basket analysis and consumer behaviors. So CPG companies, I know, are just foaming at the mouth for that information, and now they have it at their fingertips, which is really exciting. It's a massive shift, I think, in that particular industry. Now, Mike, I know within your industry you leverage a lot of patient and doctor data to help measure and manage marketing and media initiatives. With the spotlight on how marketing and advertising and the advertising industries use data, how do you expect data usage for marketing, measurement, insights, and planning purposes to shift over the next 2 years? And how do you anticipate your data investments to change to support that data-driven marketing planning?
Yeah, I think broader privacy concerns over consumer data will certainly spill over and impact how we use these tools to resolve the impact of our marketing investments. Pharma, having dealt with or dealing, not dealt with, but working within the environment of HIPAA compliance, means that we may actually be ahead in some respect, right? In that our data already needs to be sanitized, tokenized to meet HIPAA compliance standards, which are fairly strict protections in patient privacy. So we have experience, working within constraints and still getting to the degree of insights that we feel we need in order to make informed business decisions. But that said, there will obviously be ever more focus on technology and data solutions that help to mitigate that loss of data granularity that we expect to see without necessarily losing the quality of the insight and actionability of those insights. At Gilead, talking about the next 2 or 3 years in terms of our data investments, we're putting a lot more focus in our ability to connect our marketing efforts across channels seamlessly, right, via omni-channel. And this goes back to the first question on how our data strategy, or our digital strategy, is starting to mature. And so one of the challenges there is really trying to marry the data from these different channels and sources so that we can model next best engagement and execute a more personalized, dynamic, relevant, targeted campaign. And we're certainly not there yet, but that's what we're building towards, and that's where our focus is going to be.
Great. And I actually want to direct my last question to Doug. Doug, you have the unique and good fortune of having a multitude of clients across industries. The vendors in this space of marketing analytics and measurement are on the cusp of understanding what is happening in the future. So what do you think the next 2 to 3 years is going to bring, given your knowledge of what your clients are going through and what you understand about different industry needs?
Sure. Yeah, great question. It's going to be all about the constant focus on evolving the analytics to find that the right balance of probabilistic or model-based approaches with deterministic one-to-one approaches to fill in the blanks of data sparsity, right? That's created by a lot of these changes in the ecosystem. That's one. The other big trends that we're seeing out there is accelerated global scale, being able to do this consistently across multiple markets, so it's comparable and you can learn from it. The third area that we really focus on with a lot of companies is the move towards closed loop. So integrating things like testing and ongoing testing and validation processes and activation processes into this. And the last point I'll make is that, with what we've heard across between Sean and Mike and John, it's this move towards integrated analytics, right? So it's not just looking at marketing, it's bringing in things like pricing analytics and business forecasting and testing and other forms to have a more holistic view of the business. So that's what we're seeing today, and that's where we think it'll continue to go over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and from my point of view at Forrester, I think that we're seeing kind of a need for simplicity, which was mentioned earlier, a demand for transparency and transparency into these models. And when I hear the word transparency, marketers really mean I just need to understand what's going on. I don't need to kind of dive into explanatory values and why things, you just need to understand what's going on. And Doug, you mentioned, and we completely agree, this notion of inclusiveness of other functional insights. And I think that was accelerated by COVID, right? So we started hearing a lot of CPG and retailers start to consider demand generation, inventory availability, and then shifting their media flighting based on those two. I think COVID accelerated that the more coordinated, what we call at Forrester, insights-driven approaches as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. So thank you, everybody, for attending the session today. We really appreciate it. We have 2 questions that I want to try to see if we can tackle before we close out. And this one is directly to John. John, how did you know when you were at the tipping point of gaining organizational buy-in and traction with your unified analytics program?
Yeah, it was hard fought. Let's just be clear. I think Sean may have said it, just the idea of educating and educating and educating. I don't know what the marketers say, that you have to say something 7 times before it sinks in. There was a lot of that, but I think the moment that I actually knew we were breaking through was when we stopped pushing in terms of, hey, here's the latest quarterly or semi-annual results of where we were at with our media mix model, and the marketing team was asking, or I would see the ROI reflected and their business case to go get more dollars. And so I think for me, it just sort of got woven into the vernacular of the team and how they thought about the strategy. And so I think, but like I said, that was a long journey of, again, going back to the point of leading with empathy, deeply immersing yourself in what the marketing team and the business is trying to do, understanding the challenges of how they did their work before and how what we were trying to propose with the new framework and rubric would help them. It was all of that. So I think maybe the other thing I would say is the thing I underestimated was, and Doug was on this journey as well at Starbucks, was the data side of it and the data journey, and the amount of the sheer heavy lifting of even doing one cut of the models. And I think we got better over time, but I think the more that can be streamlined and automated and create discipline where it's not a big monumental effort to rerun or update the model on a semi-annual or quarterly basis, but that can be automated. I think if, turning back time on Starbucks, I would have invested more resources there to help in that space, because it ended up being just such a huge lift every time we wanted to look at it. And so I think that maybe is another journey that, maybe best practice. Don't underestimate the effort of the data collection and integration to bring the modeling to life.
That is the number one challenge year after year when we ask the question, what prevents you from using, or what's the biggest challenge with marketing measurement optimization, is data velocity, data quality, managing multiple data sources. Next question to Sean before we close out. How do you balance competing priorities of brands and markets when rolling out a unified marketing measurement program?
That's a great question. I'd say we're still working on that, to be honest, because historically the way we budget and plan is on a regional basis, which has hindered our ability to necessarily fully optimize our marketing investment, because when your P&L is managed in regional budgets, it's hard to flow dollars from one marketing budget P&L to another as fluidly as you might within a market. So honestly, we're still managing through that, and actually the data and marketing mix approach that we're using is the number one lever for opening up that as an opportunity. And now we just need to figure out how to tackle it.
Great. Well, I want to thank my panelists for sticking with me for about 40 minutes to have this lively discussion on best practices for adoption and activation of unified marketing measurement approaches. Doug and the MMA team, thank you for inviting me to moderate this panel, and I'm going to send it back to Ellen where she's going to close out the session.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Doug, Tina, John, Mike, and Sean for today's really engaging and interesting discussion. And thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. I know we went a bit long. You will be receiving an email with a direct link to today's recorded presentation, so you can revisit all the great insights that were shared. Of course, in the meantime, and at any time, we welcome the opportunity to speak with you, so please reach out to us directly. That now concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.